85% of adults say they regularly experience stress, with half recognising that they are too stressed. 1 in 4 adults will experience a mental health issue this year. 1 in 3 students admit to suffering from a mental health problem. There's a very good chance that your neighbour, co-worker, friend or family member are dealing with this issue in their lives right now. So often it's a silent battle that goes on behind closed doors. We can struggle to talk about what's on our minds and look after our mental fitness as well as our physical and spiritual well-being. Therefore, we need to talk about anxiety. This autumn, we'll be looking at some of the different forms of anxiety and the issues that can be on our minds. Jesus had a lot to say about our mental well-being, and we believe his gospel is the very best solution to dealing with anxiety. Today we've gathered a group of people to share their stories about anxiety. They're going to be talking about the struggles that they've faced and still continue to face in that area. So, hi guys, thanks for being with us this evening, and I just want to encourage you that as you share your story, you'll be having a huge impact for a lot of people, because people who think that they're the only one going through that thing, something that you're saying could really help them to realise they're not on their own, to know that there's hope in their situation. And so I just encourage you to be open and vulnerable, because this is really helpful for people to hear about anxiety. So let's kick it off with you, Meryl. Tell us a little bit about the struggles you've had with anxiety in your life.
I used to be very confident when I was in primary school. I've struggled a lot with being in big crowds. I don't like being the centre of attention. And growing up in a big family, a family of eight, and being right in the middle, I was number 4. And all my brothers and sisters used to get up and dance and sing, and I'd want to, and I would just be like, I can't do it. And they would be like, come on. And that never used to help, it used to make it worse. But going through school, secondary school, once I got to secondary school, it was like really bad for me. It was very hard. First 2 years weren't too bad, but the third year onwards it started getting really, really bad, and I started getting very, very nervous about everything, anxious about everything, scared about everything, and there was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of fights, football-related stuff going on, race-related stuff. Roots was a big thing then, and and with the National Front, and there's all this stuff, and I was going down and getting dark, and I was just like, I have to put on a brave face. And it was the same in my estate. Grew up on an estate where there was a lot of gangs. I was in a gang, and you just can't show weakness. Basically just learnt how to put on a front, and I was just fake. And
so how did you feel? Did you feel like you had people around that you could talk to, or was it something where you're like, I'm on my own in this?
There was no one to speak to whatsoever. Couldn't tell my parents, and I struggled with my dad. Our relationship wasn't that great. I couldn't talk to my mum, and I love my mum, but I just couldn't relate. And then I was living a lifestyle which I was trying to hide from her, because I was in gangs, I was in drugs, getting in fights, thieving, robbery, lots of stuff were going on, and there was no one to share it with. So it was.
So how did you deal with it when that was happening? What happened next?
Well, when this was years before I was a Christian, but it was just drugs and get high. And the problem with the drugs I was on cannabis. The problem with that is that it makes you paranoid. Just be like, my mind is just all manner of stuff's going on in my head, but at the same time, it kind of numbed the pain, because I was just so down, and I hated life. I went through the teenage spots and stuff like that, and had loads of mocking. It's the kind of thing that we always did. And then when it happened to me, I hated it. I hated it so bad. And internally, you just felt sick. Do you know what I mean? And times when I was scared, I couldn't show I was scared. So I'd be in a situation, it might be a fighting situation, and I've just got to hold it down. And I would go in and I would do, but I'm thinking, I do not want to be here. I didn't know Jesus, but I'd been taught that God is there and that Jesus. I'm like, I don't know really who Jesus is, but God, if you're there, God, get me through this night. Do you know what I mean? I want us all to get out in one piece.
So how did that escalate to a particular point, or?
Up until this was all in my teens. I started taking drugs when I was 17. This went on for 11 years up until I was 28. And a couple of years before, I became a Christian in 1992, but in 1990, I took an overdose. And that was just the pressure. I was working in a children's home at the time, and I'm working with problem in an assessment centre as well. I'm looking at their lives and going, this is me. I'd go home and I'm hitting the drugs, and then I'd go back to work. And that was my life.
So what made it change from you just being anxious and stressed to getting to a point where you were ready to take your own life?
I was just, because internally all the time I was just unhappy, then I just felt heavy all the time. But I couldn't share with anybody, I couldn't speak about it. And I was just afraid. I was so much fear, so much anger and bitterness. And I think in hindsight, I can look and say it's probably just a cry that somebody my means in the sense of communicating something's wrong. And I was just like, but I don't care. And I grabbed every pill. I was like, don't know what that is. Take that, take that. And fortunately for me, there was nothing majorly, but I emptied everything, floating in the clouds. I didn't know what was going on, but thankfully I didn't kill myself. But I didn't care at that moment. I was like, I don't care. I've just had enough. And it was, I just basically reached a point where it's like, just can't take it no more. And that was my means of.
How has it been since? Is it something you've continued to struggle with?
Yeah, ever since I became a Christian 2 years after that. That was wonderful. And for me, it was amazing because I'd had very dark spiritual experiences growing up when I was really young. And then experiencing God and through the Holy Spirit. And it was like, is the exact other end of the scale. And so I had this incredible joy, and I knew like I was loved and forgiven. But I quickly found out, I stopped cussing. I walked out of church, stopped cussing, and I stopped the drugs, literally. That was it. And so I was like, wow, I am truly born again. I am a Christian. But then I shortly after found out, like, I've still got this stuff going on inside, and it hasn't departed just because I became a Christian. And it was that really hurt, because I was kind of hoping, like, now I'm just going to be just be total all the time, just filled with joy and be at total peace and never be afraid again and never going to be angry. And
everything was going to be perfect.
Yeah. And then I had a wake-up call very quickly that wasn't, that life, the reality of life is that there's still struggles. And so the first problems that arose, it's just like, I'm still back here, I've still got all the stress and the anxiety, the fear. And the thing for me is that I always went dark. So a problem would arise and I just think the worst case scenario. And it just eat at me all the time. And it was hard not telling me. And Carolyn would just be like, what's wrong? And I wouldn't tell her nothing. And I just wouldn't talk. And it would get me angry, because I'm just like, don't ask me nothing. But really what I needed was to be able to somehow convey. And it took many, must be nearly 20 years.
And that's something for you, Matt, isn't it? That you've struggled with stress and anxiety in your work and in your situation. In terms of you're an elder, you struggled with stress as a teenager, is that right?
Yeah. Definitely through my teenage years. Definite anxiety. Anxiety was part of my story really from a young age. Always kind of unsure of myself. I was the middle of three boys. Don't know if that had an aspect to it, but just unsure of myself. Didn't quite know where I fitted in. I think even through my teenage years, being a Christian, I kind of grew up in a Christian family. Being Christian, but all my friends at school weren't Christians, and so it felt a bit out of place there. And I think through that, navigating your teenage years, really. You're trying to find where you fit, find what you're going to do with yourself and who you are, and that was something that, you know, I was just unsure of myself, so nervous of people's perceptions of me, and that happened for, you know, got worse and worse as I got older, really, and just, I guess I had my sort of plan of what I wanted to do with my life, and you know, to be popular, to be successful, to have other people like me, and it is a lot to do with what other people thought of me, and if, you know, if I was popular, if I was accepted by people, then I would feel okay about myself, but when I felt like I was outcast, I felt that I didn't fit, then I would feel incredibly insecure about who I was, and nervous and anxious and that sort of thing, and yeah, so it for me it was more about, what's my place? What am I supposed to be doing? And how do I fit in with everyone else in the world? And I think, I think I've experienced that, you know, through going my career as well. And I think when you're in a, well, you know, I'm a full-time church pastor, so you're in a church with lots of different people and lots of relationships, and all the time it's about, well, I wonder what they think of me, and you know, having those sorts of things. So you never really escape that. That's a constant aspect of your life, and that was.
So is that something that you've learnt to deal with over time? Is it something where you can see where the triggers are and you deal with it when that worry comes up, or do you still struggle to sort of keep that in check?
I think for me, a lot changed, in all honesty, when I was in my sort of late teens, and realised that I'd sort of had this own plan of how I was going to deal with it, and if I would just be successful enough, or be popular enough, or gain recognition, then everything would be okay. And when I started to do that, and actually was going quite well, but I still felt just as insecure, I was like, this is just not working, I know. And you know, you read stories about other people who have become successful and become famous or anything like that, and use their talents, but you know, it didn't help that situation. And for me, in all honesty, you know, giving my life to Jesus when I was sort of 18, 19, and really making that commitment and being like, I'm going to follow you in my life, that just made the world a difference, because I was trying to establish my own path and work out my own identity. But the moment that I said, well, okay, I'm just going to accept who you say that I am, and my identity in you, that just gave me a grounding and a foundation, that I felt that I don't have to wake up every day and prove my worth to the world, or find my place, because I know God, and God's got a plan. And just that aspect of God having a plan for my life, because I think that pressure, especially when I was younger, you have this huge amount of pressure of like, what's your life going to be about? You want it to count. You don't want to waste it. And that, knowing that from God, just lifted that so much. It's like, okay, I'm not in control of my life. I don't have to dictate everything. God's got a path for me, and trusting that, even though you don't know what that is, you know, that's not always easy, but trusting that there is a sort of a purpose and a direction that you are going, it just makes the world a difference to me, in all honesty.
Because I think that's something everyone can relate to, is uncertainty, and how terrifying it is not knowing what's going to happen, like in a situation, and when things change, it makes you stressed, what's going to happen next. I know that for you, Debs, you had quite a big life change happen, didn't you?
When I had Archer, yeah. I mean, when I was thinking about when I was younger, I didn't really suffer from anxiety. I was always quite a laid back person, and kind of took things as they came, quite confident in general. And then I had my son, and lots of things around that were very difficult, in terms of pregnancy and the birth and so on. And I did suffer from postnatal depression, but a big part of that was I was incredibly anxious. And as such, I felt very different to who I had been. It felt like kind of just who I was had gone and been replaced by this really anxious person who couldn't handle much of life. But then within that kind of, we've had some challenges with Archer's development, and he had some developmental delays, and you know, there's still we're still figuring some things out around that. But it's incredibly hard. I think it's hard for any parent not to worry about their child's future, but I found it very hard not to worry a lot more about his future in terms of what's that going to look like if he's with having special needs. Is he going to live independently? Is he going to get married one day, or that sort of thing? Is he going to always struggle at school? Is he going to always be the odd one out? Because a lot of his young life he's always been just the different one, which when it's you kind of just want to fit in, don't you? And so it's hard not to sometimes just look at that situation and just feel incredibly anxious and there's a lot of disappointment around that as well. I think in terms of what you think life is going to look like, and then what it actually looks like, and the fact that it's totally out of your control. But actually,
how does that look in like your day-to-day life when you're being a mom and you're taking care of him? Like paint a picture for us of in your mind what's going on.
It really varies depending on where I am. So if it's just me and Archer, I find it a lot easier. So as a result, sometimes I can hide away a bit, because actually if it's just the two of us, then I feel like I'm not going to have to fight this comparison thing of other children in the room and feeling like he's the different one. But also I'm not going to have to worry about if he's okay, or if he's going to kick off, or if he's going to, because he struggles a little bit in social situations. So, but obviously you still want to live life, and actually I don't want to just live life behind a closed door. So it really depends. Then sometimes I can be in situations and he'll really surprise us and just absolutely handle it really well, and it'll be really fun. And other times it can just be incredibly stressful, and all I want to do is just run away and go live in a cabin in the mountains and never have to not do life anymore.
So apart from imagining yourself in a cabin, how do you cope with that? Like, what have you learned through that, and how have you learned to cope with dealing with that situation?
I mean, I've learned it's okay sometimes it's good to push through, and sometimes it's okay to say, this just isn't really happening, we're going to head home, or we're going to go do something different. And actually, we don't have to always push through, because sometimes people in the room will be like, oh, come on, stay, we want you to stay. But it's like, well, I know, but I've got to figure out what's best for us right now. A lot of support as well. So spending time with people who really love Archer and really have pushed through in loving Archer, even when it's been a bit of a challenge, and people he's really comfortable around, and that's quite a helpful way of coping with it, is finding things to do that are really fun, with people he also feels really safe with. And also just taking some time where I've got a really supportive family, so where they will take him and I can have a bit of time where I can just walk into a social situation and not worry about that.
How was it for you in terms of just imagining that there was a problem and kind of talking about that and realising that you were more than just a bit stressed about the situation? Because I think often people can think, I'm just stressed, but actually they are anxious, but it's really hard to define. It's really hard for people to admit and realise that that's going on.
There was a lot of, I think I was in denial for quite a long time about how much I was struggling with my mental health, but also how much about what was going on with Archer. So you people, often say, oh, I'm sure he'll be fine. And he will be fine. He is fine. But you kind of think it's really hard. From a very young age, I find it difficult that from almost when babies are born, it's like the milestones and are they doing this yet? And yes, they're doing this and they're doing this. It's all this pressure, and you kind of think these little kids are so young and they're already being compared to each other. It's like their whole life is like one big comparison. And initially, I was in quite a lot of denial about it and about myself. And I think once I acknowledged that I was really struggling and that actually probably something else was going on with Archer, we could then take more steps to manage that in terms of managing my mental health, but also managing some of the stuff with Archer, getting him some support and stuff. And also being okay with the fact that we were disappointed and actually sort of dealing with that a bit as a couple with my husband, and still dealing with that really.
Can anyone else relate to that feeling of when you had to define, okay, there's a problem here, can I speak to someone, who do I speak to?
Probably all of us at some point.
So tell us about your story, April.
I'm going to try and, I'll try and do it without crying. I've always had ups and downs. I have always been struggled because through school from like a young age I was bullied pretty badly, and really struggled with like friendships, especially like my female friendships, and then from a young age, this is from a young age was really inappropriately approached by men, and so I sort of learnt from that that was where my worth was. I think because of the bullying, I found it really hard to have female friendships, and I had men that were acting as friends and in an appropriate way, and then so I learned, okay, so this is where my worth is. This is how I get friendship, is actually through being like through my sexuality, basically. So years down the line, I started getting like depression, anxiety for a really long time, and like my mum was really good at helping me because I think a lot of women in my family just had struggled with it. So they were like, "This is what we've got to do. This is how we just talk about it." And I'm always worn my heart on my sleeve. I've always been someone that can really talk about where I'm at. I'm quite black and white with that. I do. If someone asks me a question, I'll honestly answer it. And so I had things like that going on, and she was really helpful at helping with that and trying to process it. I didn't tell anyone until I was a lot older about how a few men and males in my life had been with me until I was like 17. That didn't come out, and then
so with that whole part of it, you were carrying that for a really long time, not telling anyone. What did that do to you in terms of your mindset?
Well, it just like I said, I just with friendships, I didn't really know how to have friendships, really. I didn't know how to be other than really flirty and stuff, because I was like, that's where I'd learnt where my worth was. And that was up until like really recently, like maybe in like the last year, like year and a half, I really learnt that was a lie. But yeah, so that really changed that, and like the depression and anxiety circle just kept coming round, and then with friendships as well, I get really bad anxiety if like I text someone, I don't text back, or I think, oh, they don't like me. Okay, I'll just back up, and I do shut down, and I go into that zone. So that's like I just go back to like that schoolgirl, like that sort of, I guess, 13-year-old me just goes, they don't want to be friends with you, just shut down. So and I still have that now. I really have to work through that, and I really have to tell myself, okay, no, you do need to take a step back. You do need to protect your heart a bit. But that doesn't mean that they just dislike you. It just means that something's come up and they've forgotten to, or, and you just need to calm down and pray through it and just be like, okay, hand it over to God, put the foot at the cross, and just be like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah. So Dan, for you struggle with depression.
Yeah, I think I've probably really only verbalised it in the last couple of weeks as well. For me, growing up was okay. I was pretty confident. I still am in lots of ways. It's probably masks quite a lot. So I knew lots of people that friends or friends of parents, friends that had depression, and my view was just get over it, just deal with it. Like, come on, you're just being sad. Do something and you get over it. And the funny thing is, I've ended up working in mental health, and I'm not quite sure why. But recently, I've been struggling with depression. I've isolated myself. So really strange for me would be, I turned off the other week phones, social media, and just hid away in my room. Hid away from my family, my friends. Didn't want to speak to anyone. Laid in bed. I slept more. I was tired. I wasn't exercising. And I was depressed. And I still. I'm carrying that feeling there, definitely. But it's been really hard to say that for me.
What kind of gave you the strength to sort of be able to come to terms with saying that?
I don't know if I'm fully coming to terms with saying that at the moment, which sounds really silly because I work in it every day and I deal with it every day, and I sit with people that have spent a lifetime feeling depressed or on medication or receiving treatment. And I'm still struggling with that in terms of what it means for me, my family, and how I work through that with people, because I'm being fairly like self-reliant, I think, and there's a real danger in that. I can't rely on my physical attributes. or my intelligence to get me through that. It doesn't work like that.
So is it something that sort of kind of snuck up on you, or was it something that you'd hidden away for a long time? Or
no, I think it's something that snuck up on me. I can't associate it to a specific event. Some people can. For me, there's been a build-up, and I look back and I think, oh, life now isn't easy. There's pressure from everywhere, and it is. For me, social media. I look at that guy. He can lift this. He can run this. He can climb this. Look at him. He's got a body that I want, and we face that. And I've realised that again. A bit more insight for me that's affecting me. I like working out. I like being healthy, but I've really neglected how I am mentally, because I think I just put it to the side. And just a build up of, family's tough nowadays. Dealing with things with your kids is tough. Church is tough. I found that quite difficult recently. It's probably is it the straw that broke the camel's back? I don't know what it is, but it was probably just a straw, and just sent me to my bed. My bed's my safe place, but it's a dangerous place as well, isn't it? It's I can turn everything off. I can shut the door, and I can avoid it.
I think, I think for so many people, including myself included, it's the culmination rather than one big thing. And I think you hear stories sometimes of people when there is something that's big, massive that's happened in their life, and then depression, anxiety kicks in because of it, and that's their story. But I think for other people, and I would say this is true for me, it's like, it's not one thing, it's the overwhelming nature of, okay, that's tougher than I would like it to be, and that's tougher, and that's tougher, and that's tougher. And then you wake up one day and feel just overwhelmed by all the different things. And I think that's part of the reason that stops you speaking about it, because when you say, well, it's kind of because of this, and it's kind of because of that, and you sort of tell yourself, well, it's not really a big deal. That thing.
Shouldn't cause me to feel
family's
like
tough, everyone's family's tough, and you sort of talk yourself out of speaking to anyone else because you think it's not legitimate or it's not bad enough that justifies the way that you're feeling. But I think for so many people, that when it's all the different things adding up over a period of time, you think, why am I feeling like this, or why is this so tough right now? And then you realise that that is weighing on you more than you thought it was, and that is making you feel bad about who you are, and all those. And when you get to a place, which I know I've been, where every single aspect is difficult, it's like, well, I can't ignore that, because if I ignore it and turn here, and that's difficult as well. Family life is difficult, and church life is difficult, and friendships or career or whatever. That's just wearing. It's just so tiring to live that every single day when every aspect of your life is difficult.
It becomes like a debt, doesn't it, of lots of different things on top of each other. How's it been for you? Because you run your own business, don't you? So I'm sure there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. How's that sort of impacted you in terms of your anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, things are a lot more stable now. So, but before, I mean, the company's quite young, so I'm going into my 4th year, but I think the fact that for me it's really been a not knowing what the future is going to bring. When you own a company, all responsibility is on you. Firstly, everyone that works for you can go home at 5 o'clock, and you're still thinking, okay, I need another client because I can't pay for everyone that's gone home at 5 o'clock. It can be tiring. It has a lot of potential to be tiring when you're thinking about it all the time, especially with when new things are added. That means new expenses are coming. You're getting married, you're having children, you moving houses. All of these things, new expenses are added, and the responsibility is on you to find the money. So I know for me last year, money was a huge thing when it came to like that. That hit me a lot. And made me very, very anxious. Just like Matt was saying, just things are added. At first you're like, you know what, that's okay. I can take a month and I don't need to pay this month. I can deal with it next month. And you realize halfway through the month, something else has come and you're like, oh my goodness, how the hell am I going to be able to pay all of this? It was big. It It was really, really big. Yeah.
Why was money such a big factor of your stress within starting a business? Obviously, that some people would say, you know, there's so much freedom when you start a business, there's so many different options, you're doing what you want to do, but obviously in reality it's really stressful and really difficult.
Yeah.
Why was money like the big thing for you?
Do you know, that's the funny thing, because whenever people talk to me about business, I tell them the positives, and I tell them, like, you have all of this freedom, it's a lot of fun, but I think sometimes business is like glamorized in one sense. Is made to look like you start a business and in a month's time you're a millionaire. Yeah, and then you do a month of it and you realize you can't pay your rent. Yeah, so for me, money was a massive factor, because that was my source of income. I had no other. I put kind of like all my eggs on this basket. On top of that, I felt anxious because I wanted to seem like someone. I wanted to seem like somebody who had achieved. And at the beginning of my company, when I was making no money, I had to get side jobs. I'm somebody with a master's. From a like top university, but I had to get like a cleaning jobs and all of this because I had put my eggs on this basket. I didn't pursue my masters, and I didn't want people to look down on me, you know. So money was a massive factor. One, because I actually needed it, but two, I had people on me saying, "Oh yeah, I don't think you're really cut out for this," and I just wanted to prove them wrong. So every
it's like
aspect
a completely different level of responsibility.
Yeah.
So for you, Debs, you're a director in your company, aren't you? So I'm sure you can relate to that whole thing, the feeling, the pressure
absolutely.
of your position.
I mean, it's I actually work within my dad's company, so I've worked with him really closely over the years and seen him build it from nothing to where it is now. And now it is quite a big company. But he'd still say now, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. He just, even though he has been successful, the pressure of it, I think, is unbelievable, really. And I think now I'm kind of there, you know, I'm responsible for 120 staff, and we've had a tough few months. We're within construction, and some of the effects of Brexit, you know, on the economy, and the housing market slowing down. They're not building as many houses. Developers are a bit nervous and all that kind of stuff. And we're all having conversations of where are we going to be in a few months. And also I'm constantly thinking, there's 120 people whose livelihoods are you know, they're relying upon us to make this work. You know, we're in it together, but at the same time, it feels like a massive pressure that there's all these people, and I know them, and I know their families, and you know, you don't want a single person to lose their job. So there's a heck of a lot around, and you need money to pay people, and that's a very real thing. So, obviously, you're much smaller, and but it's similar. It's similar stuff. I think,
it really is. It is just responsibility over people and over yourself and your livelihood. And sometimes you could even be in a good place. Like it was literally yesterday. Like everything's fine with me. But I just started to think about the future and the potential expenses that could come. And you just start to feel it again. You're like, oh my goodness, I need more clients. And you're okay. Like if somebody was to look at you or look at like a paper profile of you, you're fine. But you just start to think about what could come. Who else could come into your job or whatever. Yeah.
And there are so many unknowns.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no guarantees at all. So you can think, oh, we're doing quite well. And then some, you know, we've just had a couple of people go bust on us owing us a lot of money. Like that can, you know, it's something, and you can think, oh, we were doing all right. And then it's like, boom, and you're like, oh man, like, or, you know, or the economy stuff, you know, there's just so much out of your control, but you're trying to sort of control it. So it's just
You run your own business, don't you?
So me and my husband, we have a business as well. So he does a lot more of the running day to day, I guess, but being involved in that. And I think even the pressures of money comes into that. So me getting ill, I got ill last year, my depression got quite bad and I had to step down from work. And I think financially, being on a low salary, running a business, that's quite scary to go into. And living in an expensive city. I think it's trying to be wise with your money, but it's also being wise with your health and knowing that me pushing through was probably just going to be dangerous for me. So yeah, I think juggling those things can be really difficult, especially then when marriage and your work running it together. It can be tough.
It's all the different elements together, isn't it? And just to briefly go back to the whole Brexit element, the fact that it's in the news and it's all you ever hear about, that you have your own uncertainties, and then the news is just telling you life is uncertain all the time. I can imagine that, just particularly if you're running your own business, it just weighs upon your mind a lot. Like, have you found that particularly in your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it obviously affects everyone, but our company in particular, we buy products from Europe, so all of our products come from Europe. So there's so many factors. So there's the actual housing market itself, and then there's the fact that are we going to be able to get the products, and how much are we going to have to pay, and do we need to now kind of recruit people to do all this kind of customs tax stuff that we have no idea on because we've never had to really worry about it. And and it's difficult because, you know, obviously there's lots of people around you who are really for leaving, and there's lots of people who are up for remaining, and there's all this kind of tension of what you say about it. And within the company, we want to be careful what we say, but you know, it's definitely a tough time in terms of not really knowing quite what's coming and trying to be smart and think of clever ways to kind of plan as much as you can, I guess.
I think just because we're talking about the effect of Brexit and so forth, for me, I work in a 0 hours contract, so I don't run my own business, but they basically treat you like you're running your own business. But when there's no work, you don't get paid, and you can't work for nobody else because you're under contract. And if you leave, then you're not allowed to work on the same project for anybody else for a minimum of a month. They used to do it 6 months, and they've been made to shrink it. But in December last year, I was on a retainer for 6 months, which was great, first time. And then I was told that, right, we got no work, and we weren't paid by the other company, so therefore you've got no money. We're not getting paid your retainer, and that was it. And so I was out from December up until end of May, and with nothing. And I was the breadwinner, and so I was just like, oh God, and I'm just like praying and just asking God to just keep. And for me, it was just about keeping my mind, because my wife was concerned, and we're all praying, but rightly she's concerned financially, and just like, God, you need to help us. And I can look and just go, God, this is so good. People came and gave us money. I'm looking, going, God, I don't know how we're getting through month after month after month, or whatever little bits of savings I had was gone. I'd used that to pay the mortgage, food on the table. That was to pay the bills, and that was dried up, finished, and CVs out. And I ended up doing, just working in industrial laundry, and so I was grateful, but even for that, it was only for like about a month or so. It took me months to get that. And
the reasons for that are not out of your hands, aren't they? You couldn't have controlled it. No. But then when it happens, how did that make you feel about you? You're the breadwinner and you're not bringing anything in.
Yeah. I think because I'm not in the place that I used to be, that deep cycle of depression and hopelessness, and is it worth it, and diving in the bedroom and don't talk to nobody, and people go, where's Mel gone? Anne's gone, it's all right, he's had enough. And she would just let me go, and she came to understand how I was, and she would just talk, so gently. But I think I was just all the time I was just looking to God all the time, going, God, I'm going to have to just trust you. And I'm reading the word, and I'm looking and going, like, I have to cast my cares on you, and I have to look and go, you mean good for me. And so this has happened, and at the same time I'm thinking, there's other guys I work with in the same position, and they don't know God. I'm like, I have no idea what they're doing, how they're coping. I'm like, at least I can run, even with my mental struggles sometimes, I can run to you and just say, I know you love me. And I'm like, God, you've got to make a breakthrough somehow, and
Have you found over time that you've learned any lessons in terms of noticing when you're on the brink of getting anxious about something and looking at how you dealt with it before? Has it been helpful to be like, okay, I can see that, I'm going to start to look at that differently, or I'm going to stop that here, or I'm going to turn to my family? Like, what kind of ways did you cope with it?
What I would do years ago would be, as I said, I'd say nothing, so I could feel like I'm sinking and my whole thoughts become negative. Whereas now, having gone through counselling, my wife and I had marriage counselling, she can see little signs. And so it's quicker, I can just go, look, I'm not feeling that good. And we can kind of jump on it straight away and kind of like, right, how are we going to deal with this now? And then it's really then trying to just start going, right, now I need to stop thinking, like just allowing the negative thoughts to just take over my mind and just start running with them, because that's how I'd go to work and I'm going through the motions, but inside I'm just thinking like, I hate my job. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to worship. And I feel so unworthy. And I'm like, God, this is not who I am, but this is how I feel. And I think it's because I've just become very much more transparent with people. So people ask me, how you doing? And I'll just now quickly just go, hey, I'm not doing that good. But I've just said to people, I want to try and be as transparent as possible. And I've found that speaking and saying honestly how you feel is so much better than just I'm just going to try and soldier on while internally I'm actually just sinking under the very low.
So Arnold, you're a student leader, is that right?
Yeah.
So for you, what's that been like in terms of the young people that you're around and the uncertainty they have about tomorrow and the way that they're making their decisions and living their lives for today? Yeah,
I mean, I think that's played out quite a few ways. One big way is, let's just go crazy today, because who cares? Well, I'm not going to care about what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's just do anything today. You see that a lot, actually. I remember when I was in uni, it was just that mindset, like, today is the day, tomorrow it doesn't matter. I was really thinking as to why that happens. I was thinking about this even today. Well, why is it that students don't want to think about tomorrow? Some of the students that I'll talk to would be like, hey, so like you're in your second year now, what do you want to do later? And they don't even want to talk about it. I was like, why? Why is it? And I've asked around, and you just realize that I guess you want your life to mean something, and you've left mum and dad, and now all the responsibility is on you. I don't know if you guys had this in school, where your friend would revise loads and you're not revising, and you just feel so bad.
Always?
Yeah. yeah, exactly. And now you're responsible for the future. So let's not think about that. Let's just do today, and let's just go crazy today. Let's have fun today. And whenever the topic of tomorrow is brought up, you do see those signs of anxiety come up, because there is no certainty, and you don't really trust yourself. I'm just not a good enough person. All these people revising, I find it hard to understand all of this work. I'm going to fail my grades. All of this comes even before the results have come out,
So with you having had your own business, if you're looking at these young people and thinking, I can understand completely how overwhelmed you must feel. Like, obviously we all can in different ways. We all have that sense of, I don't know what's coming next. This is really overwhelming. This is really scary. Everyone looks like they're doing so much better. What do you say to students that you're talking to help them deal with their anxiety?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I think I tried to change their mindset of the today. So, because I can relate, you can really see it in their faces. They're just like, I'm just going to fail. And I wouldn't tell them, well, just go crazy today. I'd probably tell them, tomorrow's coming, but just focus on trying as hard as you can today. Just focus on, let's go through this one topic or this one page today. And at least you've achieved that. Because it just seems like achievement is gained through bite-sized chunks, isn't it? It's not like a massive, you better make sure that you grab this whole bit of success. It's just bite-sized chunks, and I think it becomes overwhelming when you add all the days together. Yeah, and if you just take it, realize that you want to get somewhere, but know that you just need to take it as bite-sized chunks, as small page-by-page bits of effort, as opposed to this massive stance of work. And also realize that your future isn't really determined by grades necessarily, you know, and there's so other extracurricular skills that you should have that are essential for being in a good working environment.
And that whole response, oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that one day at a time thing applies to so much, though. I think so much, for me anyway, anxiety comes when when I'm thinking too much about the future.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know it can be good to plan, but you just get caught up in thinking about the future and can go worst case scenario, or what if this happens, what if that happens. But actually, I think, you know, when Jesus sort of said, you know, he said, don't worry about tomorrow, today has enough trouble of its own. I think actually sometimes just taking today and just doing today, and then can actually be so helpful, because
because
so easy to worry
that
about
actually
the future.
was the most helpful for me. When Jesus was like, don't worry about tomorrow. So I used to, with the money issue, I used to just be like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to pay my rent at the end of the month, but today I can buy food. And today I have clothes to wear, and today I have a house to sleep on. That was really helpful. I don't think I would have been able to handle it if I just didn't take it as, this is what's going on today, and that's fine.
So to flip that on its head a little bit, with that whole living for today thing of like, I'm just going to focus on today, you have a lot of people making really big decisions, and sex is obviously a massive part of that. You'll see people being like, just thinking about today, that's it, I'm just going to make the decisions I want to make that serve me today. So Ruby, for you, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think growing up, it was tough going through college and being in relationships, and that was quite a big pressure. And feeling the burden of that, I think social media for me, is really difficult. I find it really hard. And especially throughout my teenage years, getting stuck just watching porn and the addiction that had. I think, especially as a girl, it's not something that's talked about. I think as guys, it can be jokey and it's not awkward to talk about. But as a girl, I think you take on that shame and you just want to hide it, and you want to bury it, and you want to bury it. And I think it just caused me to be so anxious in my relationships, my family, just even in myself. And it caused me to question a lot of things. It caused me to question my sexuality. It caused me to... it really affected my body image and the way I viewed myself. And that was a difficult kind of road to walk down. And it really affected the way I viewed men as well. And that was something that I had to work through and really deal with. And it's been tough. It's been really hard. And I think even carrying that shame, the more you carry it and the more, the longer the road kind of continues, you get more and more anxious, and you don't want people to know. There were so many secrets that I was carrying. There were so many things that I felt no one can know. No one can know these things that I've done. I've hurt these people, or I've done this thing, or I've watched these things. And I think it's really difficult to then feel free and feel like everything's okay and I'm all right. And I think from the outside, probably people thought I was really confident, and I had lots of friends, and I was in relationships, but actually they were all coping mechanisms.
So what you were saying about being a girl in particular, making you feel like you held even more shame. Just tell us a bit more about that. Why do you think you felt that way?
I think growing up, it was never talked about, especially within I wasn't walking with God, and a lot of my friends were doing similar things to me, but it was never talked about. Porn wasn't it was never talked about within my girls' kind of friendship. And I think a lot of my guy friends would joke about it and talk about it, but I think for me as a woman, I didn't feel that was something that I could even joke about. It was just like, that just needs to be secret, and no one can know that, because it was just wrong, and it just wasn't right.
I think even within like Christian circles, even growing up, you know, within the church myself, it was still always talked about as a guy's struggle. Yeah. Like, guys
Yeah.
struggle with lust and those kind of things, and girls might struggle with some other stuff. So then, if you were a girl who's struggling with lust and kind of lots of the things that go with that, and feeling tempted in different ways or doing different things, I think there was that added thing, because it was like, but this is a guy's problem. So what's going on with you? Are you like, you know?
And I think that was even hard coming back to church and being quite an open book and not feeling like I needed to hide anything anymore, but still feeling like that was something that the guys talked about within church, and knowing that there's an appropriate setting to talk about that, but it's also been like, actually, this isn't talked about enough. And I think even working with young people is massive. It's just everywhere. And I think you think it's only 18s plus, but actually you speak to 12-year-olds and they're watching it, they're seeing it, and it's not just guys, it's girls as well. And I think it needs to be something that's addressed and something that's talked about. And the more women speak about it and talk about their struggle, the more others are going to be able to say, hey, do you know what, I really struggle in that.
What do you think perpetuated it for you? I mean, obviously there's that age-old line now where people are like, oh, social media, that's the problem with everything. And obviously it's a huge thing for people. And that access that there is, and that kind of really easy temptation for people to go and make a bad decision online. For you, was it a similar thing? Or?
Yeah, I think it was. I think I kind of went into end of school, colleges, and Instagram was kind of becoming this big thing. And I think even now, for me, I know that I can't be on social media. It's somewhere where that I know that I'm going to be tempted and I'm going to struggle. So even if I'm not going straight to a porn site, actually, I can still be tempted on social media. And I think sometimes we kind of cover it up with thinking, oh, it's just Instagram, it's just a picture, or it's just a 3-second video. But actually, if you're lusting within your heart, do you know what I mean? And I think it's, for me, drawing that line, and definitely social media was a massive influence in that. And it just affected the way I viewed myself, the way I viewed men, the way I viewed women. And yeah, it was just a difficult road to kind of get out of.
How did you kind of establish there was a problem and start to get the strength to do something about it?
I think when I came to church, and I think a lot of the stuff that I kind of walked through in having been in sexual relationships before that and trying to work that out and carrying a lot of shame, a lot of that came with, actually, I know I've been watching stuff that hasn't been helpful, and things that have been kind of distorting my view of what God's plan was for sex was. And yeah, I think walking that through with others, walking that through with other ladies that supported me and kept me accountable, because it was something that I had to make sure that it wasn't like it just went. I had to make sure that I kind of stopped that and learned to deal with it and was honest about it. And I think we were talking about it earlier, just how sometimes just speaking it out and sharing it is the first step. And I think with a lot of these things, whether it's anxiety, depression, eating disorders, actually we don't want to share it because then it means we have to face it. And I think that's the biggest step. And I think for me, in a lot of the things that I've kind of dealt with that have caused me anxiety, once I've taken that step of saying, I'm going through this and I need help, that's when a lot of the power again kind of just goes. And I'm able to then kind of deal with it and walk it through.
April, how was it for you? Obviously, having the background that you had, so you're now married, aren't you?
I am now married, yeah.
And having to bring that whole story and that whole situation that happened to you, how did that play out for you?
I was interested when you were saying that, it's like speaking it out, because obviously the first incident I had something that I remember when I was like 5, and then I had something I remember when I was like 12, that went on until I was 17 with a particular man. And I remember that there was like I had someone pray for me, and they said there's a real like they were like, you've really been silenced. And it's true, you are, and especially when you've been groomed, that is what it's called, when you're groomed and stuff, you are silenced. And so for a long time it did take a while to really talk about it and to process all different things that happened, not just like one incident, because I'd remember one thing and then I'd talk about that and process it, and it was like, oh, there's actually all this other stuff as well, and bringing that forward and having someone to talk to about it. And then I ended up having, I've said to like my husband, I like kind of jokingly said, I mean, it's pretty sad at the same time, but I said, I kind of feel sorry for anyone that met me between like 2015, 2017, because I had a complete nervous breakdown. I literally we'd had miscarriages, and we had our final one, and I had to give birth. I was induced, and that was really like horrific. And even that, like, I kind of went really numb, and I remember, okay, and that was literally the start of my nervous breakdown. And then, like, a year later, I was working on something, and another man again overstepped the line, like, hugely for me. And it got to the point where I would be in a room like this, and my husband Dan was sat next to me, and I would just not know who I was, where I was, or anything, and Dan would have to just go, "Babe, I'm your husband." And then he'd have to explain our whole life and how I am. Like, we live in Brighton. You are called April. And for like 2 months that happened. And I'd wake up in the night screaming, like having night terrors and being like, and because I just got to the point where I couldn't process it. I just was like, I couldn't talk about it, because it just set me back to like being a kid again and being like, I can't talk about it. And luckily I have a really patient partner who is there to listen.
So off the back of that then, do you feel, has anxiety sort of also come into like your sex life and your family life?
So yes, that's where I was going with that. So definitely, so for my husband and I, definitely when we got married, sex wasn't something that happened all the time. It would be like, if he touched me in a certain way, I'd just shut down. I'd be like, don't touch me there. Again, luckily I have a partner that is really loving and will listen. We've processed it, and actually for me, one of the turning points was doing redemption at church. And I've described it to like non-Christian friends, I've said it's like group therapy. And that was amazing. I've had therapy before. I was on antidepressants for like 6 years, and I've been off them now for over a year because of redemption, because I was able to just talk about it and about things that maybe, like, even my parents, as much as I love them, I'll talk about things and I can see they're getting uncomfortable. And I think for me, I could feel that in my parents, and I was like, okay, we can't talk about this. And so having a group of people that before, I don't think I'd met anyone that was in my group before, and so you could just be completely open and talk about it, and that really helped me process a lot of it. And since then, Dan and my husband and I's sex life is way better. We actually have a son now, which is amazing after not being able to have kids, and not being antidepressant and being off antidepressants for a year and a half is like, there's just been a massive healing in that. I still get anxious days, like I said, with like friendships, still get really bad anxiety, but I have ways of dealing with that now. I have like a little pin that one of my friends actually makes these little badges, and it symbolises anxiety. It's like a little lightning bolt, and I put that on, and Dan and my friends and my family know what it means, and I not necessarily need to talk about it, but you know that I'm sensitive that day. And it's also putting worship music on and just soaking that up, reading my Bible and just giving it to God. Like I said earlier, just bringing it to the foot of the cross. And that has really helped with like everything to do with our sex lives and, you know, my sexuality and how I am with that, and my anxiety with that, and friendships. It all they kind of weirdly come together for me, both those things, because of how my life's gone. It kind of, yeah.
So for you, Ruby, we were talking about sexuality there, and you were saying, you know, you made you reconsider how you viewed men and women and your body image. Like, how did it impact you in terms of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think with my body image, it impacted me massively. I think growing up, I was quite sporty and quite athletic, but as I went into kind of the end of school and into my teenage years, I realised that I was getting quite insecure about being the sporty, kind of more masculine female in the year. So I used to love sports, and it just came to a point where I just had to say no, and I was just like, no, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to do anything. And I tried to be this woman or this girl that I thought men wanted me to be. And it caused me to end up having an eating disorder. So I struggled with bulimia for maybe 5 years, on and off. And that again was something that I just felt like I couldn't tell anyone. No one could know that. And I think people were aware, but I didn't want to own up to it because I didn't want to then have to face it. And I knew if I had to face it, then it meant that they could then control it. So yeah.
So Dan, you mentioned something earlier about like looking at bodies and comparing yourself to people on Instagram and things like that. Is that something you struggled with as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think I play rugby. I play with guys that their main focus is what they look like, how big they are, how strong they are. And you sit in a changing room sometimes, and I might be the tallest, but you feel like the rugby post, like, you know, and it has an effect on you, you know. And I've just been chatting about it the last couple of weeks with another guy from rugby we've just been talking a little bit about our depression, and how we're feeling, and he's your kind of. He's a strong guy. He's a landscape gardener. He's physical. He's very able. He's kind of always the centre of attention, life of the party. And we just started talking about how he's really struggling and feeling suicidal, and tried all sorts of he's tried all sorts of drugs. He's tried illegal and legal drugs, and he doesn't know what to do. And I'm just I think I'm probably learning a bit from him as well, and about it, and about my identity. I think there's a lot of identity stuff come up. You know.
Yeah, so earlier you were talking about how pornography is often linked with guys, and I think often people would associate body issues with girls. So is that something you found difficult, because it's almost like another layer of shame or expectancy that you shouldn't have that problem?
I think so, yeah. I think that, you know, you can get like social media and it's just magazines, newspapers. There's always been media about, but it's become much more prevalent of people looking to, you know, be like me. If you do these exercises, you're going to be like me. And actually, you know, there's a fakeness to it. Yeah, they are like that. But there's so many people that are doing it and selling easy wins and look great, and have lots of likes, lots of followers, lots of comments on, and you can. It's an easy. You know, for me, it could be an easy trap to fall into and seek approval that way, and you know, those easy fixes don't work. There's, you know, but I do. It's the trap that I would go to, looking at, okay, if I just do this program, I'm just going to end up looking like this guy, and it'll make me a better rugby player, or it'll make me this. And I realise actually I'm a bit too old for all that now. I realise that my age impacts that as well, and but there is, for me, it's an identity. Try and find my identity in something else.
And just to move on to another topic, because you work in mental health, don't you? So let's talk a little bit about the connections between anxiety and mental health.
It's huge. I think anxiety is a mental health diagnosis, isn't it? It's recognised as is depression and everything else, but it's just so prevalent, and we're seeing. And with what part of my job I assess people to see if they need to be in hospital for their mental health issues, and we're seeing children as young as kind of 12, and for me personally, that's my experience. Others have assessed people younger, and we're seeing that just more and more a prevalence of this anxiety from school, from family life, from friendship groups. It's heartbreaking. I mean, it's heartbreaking for me. I come back and I look at my own children and I think, wow, what's worrying about the future? What's in store for them? And again, try and tell myself, you know, my anxiety then says, I want to solve that. I can be the cure for that. And then comparing, you know, then I have to think, and actually the gospel is the only answer for that. The Bible is really clear on that, but that can be a very difficult step to take. I want to be able to fix this, because we're told we can fix things. We can make ourselves better. Self-improvement programs, CBT courses, medication. There's all these cures out there. That they do work to a degree, but they can't bring healing like I've seen the gospel bring healing.
Do you think there's also an element of stigma as well? People don't want to talk about mental health, or it's a topic that's discussed but not about me?
I think so, yeah. I think we would quite happily talk about a physical injury that we've received, and there'll probably be sometimes a bit of pride with that. I've played for, I broke my leg doing this, and we'll all laugh about it or joke about it, or that was silly. But just actually, I spent the weekend in bed feeling really depressed. I was mentally unwell. You know, I wasn't just physically, I was mentally unwell. That's a really difficult thing to say, because it's so hidden, and it's been hidden for a long time within society. and it has wider impact. And I've really, like I said, I really struggled with that. And my whole job is around not to discriminate or to recognise stigma and break stigma down. Yet I found myself just thinking about this and this conversation, realising that I'm carrying that. I'm feeling the stigma of being mentally unwell, and people say, don't say you're off work because of stress, because don't just say you were just poorly. You had a cold, because it's and that's happened within mental health. That happened to me, and I just think, wow, we're still afraid to talk about mental health, and I've now through my last few weeks, months, I've started to understand how much more there needs to be done in regards to breaking it down. Within church, I know there'll be people that haven't talked about their mental health, that are on medications for mental health, are seeing therapists, having to meet with friends regularly for anxiety, stress, depression, and we don't talk about it. It's hidden. It is hidden, and I think there's a real danger, and I've seen the danger in that for myself. Hiding away and not talking about it has caused me to feel worse.
So in the same way you were saying that you can take on the concerns of your patients in a way, would you find that, Matt, as a pastor, there's a level of stress involved, you're dealing with a lot of different situations going on, people speaking to you. How do you define what is healthy stress and what's stress that's actually really bad for me and I need to do something about this?
You mean stress for me or
for you?
For me? Yeah, I think when you're in a job or in a position where people are sharing with you, which is it's a real privilege, to sit with people and hear their stories and hear what they're going through and that sort of thing. But obviously, when people are sharing significant things in their life and the big things of life, you do feel a bit of the weight of that, and I think in the different dynamics as well, because you know people and you relate to them as well. They're not just people that wander into your office. They're people that you know their families, so you're part of that. You're part of a community, as well as talking about big issues. So I know for me, being able to have people alongside me, I'm part of a team. I'm not just on my own trying to help people with issues, I think. And obviously, when you're speaking with your peers, the other leaders in the church, we're not going into details. This person has this, and this person said this, but it's like, I'm dealing with this, and this is what they've said, and this is how I'm feeling about that. It makes a difference, yeah.
So on a good day, what does that look like in terms of how you think about it? And on a bad day, what does that look like in terms of how you think about it and how you carry that stress with you?
I think when you're in a job like being a pastor, and I think probably in a similar way to running a business, it's like it never stops. There's no clear line of like, well, I can just leave that at the office. It's like it's people's lives, and so and the lines of you don't have an office. You're meeting with people and that sort of thing. So I think when it's in a bad place, it's like those lines completely become blurred, and you realise you're carrying other people's burdens all the way through your weekend, and it affects your family time. It affects your emotions. It affects how you're feeling. It's. I think for me, when I'm feeling, when I'm struggling, my default is to work harder. If I'm feeling things are overwhelming, I'm just like, right, well, I'll just work harder and I'll just push through and I'll just do a bit more and I'll just have that extra conversation and have that extra meeting, and that person really needs me, so I'll just be there. And then but you never get to the end of it, because as many jobs are, there is no end point. There's always more you can do. But I think for me, that's a sort of default, I would say, coping methods, but it doesn't help me cope. But it's just an instinct. I want to work harder to sort of push through it, and everything will be okay. And then it just gets worse. So that's definitely how it's in the negative.
And I just think it'd be really important to just try and help people understand the definition of stress, because I think everyone does struggle with stress, and a lot of people can explain it away, ignore it, be like, I'm just a bit stressed, it's normal, people are stressed. You just explain a little bit about what stress looks like and why it's so difficult.
I think one of the difficult things is it affects different people in different ways, and so I think that's why people, I think, am I stressed? Am I not stressed? And I think life is busy. Life is there is pressure that's quite normal, and everyone has a sort of capacity to be able to deal with. Not every day is just a walk in the park, and people know that and that sort of thing. But I think it becomes a problem when it's that constant pressure that I have to deal with this myself, and I think as a guy, maybe it's different for women, maybe it's not, but I think there is an instinct that I have to deal with things myself. When I feel stress, I'm going to work through it, or I'm going to come up with a clever solution for this, or I'm just going to whatever it is. And that compounds the issue, and so I think for me, identifying when I'm really stressed is thinking about how I'm responding to it. Like, is this provoking me to live in a different way, or making decisions that I wouldn't otherwise make, and working that extra little bit and saying yes to something when I shouldn't say yes to something, and it's me changing what I would normally do. I don't know what's healthy habits in my life. That's when I can really only speak for myself. Really, that's when I kind of realise that stress has become an issue it's become a real problem. Because I think we're all going to experience stress, but it can be stress that's a real problem, or it can be something that is just part of what we're doing, and we can continue and do what we need to do, and it's not as much of an issue.
I was just going to say, I definitely think within my company there's a lot of people a lot of the time who say they're stressed, and I think trying to understand stress is important, I think, because I think there is a degree of stress. There is a type of stress that's not a bad thing. And I think sometimes it can feel like any time the word stress is mentioned that everything about it is bad. But I think there's a quite a natural, especially with some people, there's a degree of it that makes you step up, and you can be productive, and you can be getting stuff done and help you focus. But I find for me personally, or people I can see that work around me, is when exactly what you're saying, when it gets to a certain point. But also I think it can also become quite physical. So I think that it can be something that you're feeling the pressure in your mind, but then actually I can find, like, I'm noticing my whole body's kind of tensing up. I can feel almost like a bit of a pressure in my chest, or I can feel for me personally, my jaw I can clench my jaw, and I find myself I grind my teeth at night when I'm asleep, and I do it more when I'm stressed. And so I think it can and for other people I know, it can lead to things like hair loss and loss of appetite. And so I think you can definitely see a physical effect of it as well, which then feeds into the mental anxiety around it, because you're thinking, but I'm so stressed, but now this is happening, and it kind of, so I think that can be sometimes helpful to see when you need to do something about it, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking about stress, and I was literally thinking about you putting a weight on something and building up weight to the point where it's like it's strong enough at a certain point. It's like, yeah, I can handle this, and then all of a sudden it starts bowing, and then it's like it's reaching stress, and then reaching to point of breaking point. And I think just in the life that we live in this country and in the West, everything's so quick, and it's so fast, and with all what you're talking about, body image, you've got to look like this. Do you know what I mean? And you've got to behave like this, and look at this person. This is how they're doing it, and this person's doing it like that, and you're not doing it right. And that's even in church, and I feel that still to a degree in church, and being a husband and being a father and so forth. And you mentioned what you said about capacity, and I think it's so true to try and learn that, like, God can do wonderful things in terms of strengthening your weaknesses and enhancing your capacity, but there's still a wisdom in kind of knowing that I'm taking on too much, and being able to say no. You're talking about physical pain, and I've had for the past four 5 years now, just terrible shoulder, neck problems. I had to go to hospital because of what was going on from my neck. I couldn't move my head and all of that. And they were asking me, do you know what I mean? First of all, they made sure, you weren't having a stroke or anything like that. And then saying like, what's going on in your life? Because it's just, everything's just so tight. But it's just that carrying of for me, it's like I've had to learn to say no. And sometimes people ask me, "Oh, we'd like you, think you," and I could just go, "No, I can't. I'm not taking that on."
I think that's a big thing, isn't it? Just knowing your capacity and not comparing it to someone else's capacity, and understanding what works for you.
That's excellent, and kind of looking and thinking, but especially if you're looking at somebody and you have respect for them and you've seen what they're doing, and you're going like, I should be able to do that. And I'm kind of learning now how God works, that we're all different, and some things we can do similarly, and then other things God's going, but I've strengthened this person, I've anointed this person to do that. And then you might look and think, oh, I'd like to do that. And then you try and take it on. And then for you, it becomes this massive, it doesn't mean that the other person doesn't have some challenges and so forth. Like you said about stress, but for you, the challenge is something that's going to break you. Do you know what I mean? And it'll be detrimental to, it's not necessarily going to help you grow. If anything, you start noticing that you're taking on this or this other extra thing, and it actually causes detrimental effects in your life. And then you'd have to start looking, going, well, what is the benefit of me taking on all of this? Do you know what I mean? And so when I think about stress, I know, especially if you're not feeling well, if you're tired, do you know what I mean? And all of those things, and then something unexpected happens, and that comes on top as well. Do you know what I mean? And I just think, and like you said, things like that happen in life. There's always an unexpected situation that arises, that you're like, oh, why is this, happened now? But, it's amazing that, those little things, and sometimes, the enemy will come, the devil will just come and it's like, I'm going to throw this at you as well. Do you know what I mean? Or I know you've got this, and I'm going to compound it with this. Do you know what I mean? And it can just feel like it's too many things now. And I'm always, I look at the elders and I look at people who got more capacity than me, and I'm amazed sometimes. I know I look at myself and go, I'm doing way better than I was before, but I look at others and I'm like, I have no idea how they walk that road. Because I just think like, oh man, they'll be going, where's Mel's gone? Must be in action. Where's he gone?
But that's the thing, isn't it? Everyone's so different and has completely different strengths and capacities.
Yeah, and it's okay. To be different.
Now, I think this is something that we could talk about for like another 4 hours if we wanted to, but we're probably going to have to close it there. So thank you all for just being so open and honest, and I'm sure that it will bless a lot of people just to hear you being so vulnerable about your situations, that they can relate to them and relate to what is going on in their own lives. So thanks for your time.